I knew something was wrong the moment the moving truck rolled to a stop in front of my new home, because there she was, arms crossed, sunglasses pushed so far up her face they practically cut into her forehead, and that pinched, sour expression that every victim of suburban tyranny knows too well. Karen. She stood on the gravel shoulder of the road like a self-appointed border guard monitoring the arrival of an invading army, and in her mind, I probably was one. After all, I wasn't supposed to exist, not here, not on the edge of a precious HOA-controlled kingdom. But I did, and that's what scared her. The house I bought sat just outside the official HOA boundary, a technicality so sharp you could slice paper with it. According to her, that made me a rogue element that threatened the character and standards of the community. According to me, it meant freedom. Freedom from arbitrary fines, from mailbox color inspections, from grass height policing, and most importantly, freedom from people like her. I stepped down from the truck, stretching my back, taking in the scent of pine trees, fresh date, and the crisp promise of a new beginning. Karen took a step toward me like she was about to arrest me. "You can't park that there," she snapped. I blinked at her. "I'm literally moving in." "Not here, you're not." She jabbed a manicured finger toward the house. "This is part of Maple Ridge Estates." I smiled. "Actually, it's not." The twitch in her jaw told me she had heard those exact words before and hated them every time. "This neighborhood has standards," she insisted, as if the phrase had weight beyond sheer entitlement. "We can't have just anyone setting up residence without approval. You need to speak with the HOA board before you move anything in." I rested my elbow on a moving box. "Karen, right." Her lips tightened. "Mrs. Holbrook." "Right. Well, Mrs. Holbrook, I already checked the zoning records at the county office. This house is on its own parcel, not HOA, not your jurisdiction." For a moment, just the briefest flicker, she faltered. But entitlement recovers fast. She straightened her spine. "We'll see about that." Then she marched away, heels stabbing into the gravel like she was punishing the earth for supporting my existence. I watched her go and chuckled to myself. Every neighborhood has one, but I thought being outside the HOA border would spare me the drama. I was wrong. The movers kept unloading boxes and furniture. I gave them directions, carried some things myself, and tried to settle into the excitement of building a new life. The house was older but charming, with a wraparound porch, a weathered red barn, and enough yard to finally plant the garden I had always wanted. I'd searched for months for a place exactly like this, quiet, rural, untouched by the iron fist of an HOA. By noon, everything was inside. By the afternoon, I had embarked enough to relax. By early evening, Karen struck again. She marched onto my property like she owned it, clutching a clipboard and a thick binder under her arm. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She didn't even pause. She just stormed right up to me as I was sweeping the front porch. "This area is subject to HOA review," she declared, thrusting the binder toward me. "Page 42 clearly outlines acceptable exterior colors. That," she pointed at my navy blue shutters, "is not one of them." I stared at her, stunned at the insanity. "Karen, this house was built 20 years before your HOA existed." "Mrs. Holbrook," she corrected. I grit my teeth. "Mrs. Holbrook, I already told you, I'm not part of Maple Ridge Estates. You don't control this property." She smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. It was the smile of someone who believed she had the upper hand. "We'll see what the county says about that. I've already filed a complaint." My stomach dropped. "A complaint about what?" "Unauthorized construction," she said. "Your shutters weren't that color last year. I checked the satellite images." It took me a full 5 seconds to process that. She actually looked up old satellite photos. "You're joking," I said. "Rules are rules." Then she added, with venom disguised as politeness, "We take pride in our neighborhood." Before I could respond, she pivoted sharply and walked away again. I leaned against the railing, rubbing my temples. This wasn't normal HOA meddling. This was obsession. Why did she care so much about my house, a house outside her jurisdiction? What was she so afraid of losing? Control? Power? Or was it something else entirely? By nightfall, Her behavior escalated. I noticed a car driving slowly past my property. The same car. Again. And again. Headlights off, just creeping along like it was stalking prey. When it passed the fourth time, I stepped off the porch and stood at the edge of my driveway. The car accelerated and disappeared down the road. 5 minutes later, I heard the ping of my phone. A new email from the HOA. Subject: immediate notice of violations below it. Unauthorized trash bins, unpermitted shed, improper mailbox height, excessive personal property visible from street, exterior paint violations. I stared at the list in disbelief. Trash bins weren't even on my property yet. The shed was original to the house. The mailbox hadn't been touched. She was inventing violations. I sat on the front steps, simmering with anger. I hadn't even lived here a full day, and she was already waging war. But she didn't know me. Not really. I didn't roll over. I didn't back down. And I never tolerated people trying to flex power they didn't actually have. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one. But on my terms. I looked around at the property I now called home, my peaceful haven that she was determined to disrupt. The shadows stretched long across the yard, the sky dimming to a deep blue, the crickets starting their nightly chorus. And I asked myself, how far was this woman willing to go to force me out? Because one thing was clear. She was underestimating the wrong person, and by the time this was over, she'd regret ever trying to mess with me. The next morning, I awoke to the sharp crunch of gravel beneath tires. At first, I thought it might just be a delivery truck or someone turning around at the end of the lane. But when I peeked through the blinds and saw the convoy of SUVs stopped at the road's shoulder, I knew exactly what was happening. Karen had brought reinforcements. 3 vehicles. 7 people. All wearing that same expression, chin lifted, nostrils flared, posture stiffened by self-importance. They stood clustered together like a flock of judgmental geese, each gripping an identical binder. The HOA board, I assumed. I hadn't even had my coffee yet. I briefly considered ignoring them, but they were already making their way down my driveway, led by Karen herself. She walked with purpose, arms swinging like she was storming a battlefield. Behind her, her disciples followed in perfect formation. Fine. If they wanted a confrontation, I could give them one. I opened the front door before Karen could knock, or, more likely, pound on it with righteous fury. She smiled sweetly. It was terrifying. "Good morning," she said. "We're here to discuss your numerous violations." I blinked slowly. "I don't have any violations. I'm not part of your HOA. One of the board members, a tall man with a fading comb-over, stepped forward. "We have documentation showing this residence falls within Maple Ridge's aesthetic area of influence." "Aesthetic area of what now?" Karen nodded as if this were a perfectly reasonable phrase, and not something she made up while glaring at a mirror. The HOA has authority extending beyond its immediate boundaries when such areas impact property values. "So you're telling me," I said, "that even though I'm not under your HOA, you've decided I should be. For the good of the community," she added, "you'll be required to sign the compliance agreement." She thrust a stapled packet toward me. I didn't take it. "What happens if I don't?" I asked. "You'll face escalating fines," Comb-Over Man said. "Impossible," I replied flatly. "You can't fine someone who isn't under your jurisdiction." Karen's eyes glimmered with a kind of unholy delight. "Then we'll take legal action." I stared at her for a long moment, trying to figure out whether she was serious or simply deranged. But judging by the unwavering nod behind her, they genuinely thought they could strong-arm me into joining their little empire through sheer intimidation and invented terminology. I exhaled slowly. "Look, I don't want trouble. I moved here for peace and quiet." "We all did," Karen said pointedly, "which is why it's crucial that new residents maintain the standards we've worked so hard to build." "You mean your rules?" "Our community," she corrected. "Your control," I countered. Her face twitched. It was the quickest crack in her composure yet, and the most satisfying. "We'll give you until tomorrow to sign the agreement," she said. "After that, we escalate." "Have a nice day," I replied, and shut the door before she could say another word. I stood there for a moment, forehead pressed lightly against the door, listening as their footsteps retreated. My heart hammered with adrenaline. Not fear, but fury. There was a boundary between her world and mine, and she was determined to bulldoze it with sheer entitlement. Fine. She wanted escalation. I could escalate. I spent the next 2 hours gathering documents, county zoning maps, property records, assessors' files, even the original building permits from decades ago. I laid everything out on the kitchen table, cross-referencing every detail. I wasn't just trying to defend myself. I was digging for ammunition. The deeper I went, the stranger things became. For starters, the HOA was only 7 years old. Maple Ridge Estates had been built long before Karen's reign began. The HOA was voluntary at first. Keyword, voluntary. Only after Karen became president did they attempt to convert it into a mandatory one, strong-arming homeowners into signing over rights through fear tactics and misinformation. But the boundary line was clear. My property, parcel hash 1937B, sat outside of Maple Ridge jurisdiction by exactly 37 feet. It wasn't even a close call. And yet someone had hand-drawn a dotted line on one of the HOA's maps, extending right over my home. The signature beside that line? Karen Holbrook. My jaw clenched. This wasn't ignorance. It wasn't confusion. It was deliberate. A one-woman crusade to expand her empire of pettiness. I organized my evidence, placed it in a binder, and felt the first spark of satisfaction ignite in my chest. If Karen wanted a war, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. I didn't scare easily, and I didn't fold, but I also didn't act recklessly. Revenge is most powerful when it's strategic. That afternoon, while clearing dead branches near the back of the property, I heard rustling in the trees. Heavy footsteps. Someone was in my yard. I turned quickly and spotted a man crouched behind my barn. "Hey!" I shouted. He froze, then bolted toward the road. I chased him a few steps before stopping, realizing how pointless it was. He was already diving into a silver SUV, the same one I'd seen creeping down my road the night before. And in the passenger seat, Karen. She stared at me through the window, not embarrassed or nervous, but triumphant, as if this little stunt was simply another step in her campaign. The SUV sped off, throwing dust into the air. They were trespassing now. This wasn't merely harassment. It was stalking. Why was she so obsessed with my property? With me moving here? What did she think I was threatening? I forced myself to breathe deeply, calm rising over anger. If I wanted to win, I needed to stay smart. I needed to use her own behavior against her, and I needed to be patient. That night, I heard something outside again, a metallic clank. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The trash bins I'd placed neatly behind the house were now dragged out to the front of the property, lids open, garbage tossed everywhere like a raccoon riot. Except raccoons don't leave notes. A single sheet of paper flapped against one of the bins. Violation notice. Trash must be stored per HOA guidelines. I tore the paper off, crumpled it, and hurled it into the dark. I laughed, actually laughed, because the absurdity had reached a new peak. She thought she could harass me into submission, into fear, into moving away. But people like her don't understand someone like me. The more they push, the harder I push back. And I was done playing defense. The next morning, I packed my binder, grabbed my keys, and headed to the county office. If Karen wanted to escalate, I'd escalate further. I would hit her where it hurt most. Her authority, her ego, and her power. By the time this war was over, she'd wish she never stepped foot on my property, and she definitely wouldn't see my revenge coming. The county office lobby smelled faintly of old paper and lemon cleaning spray, a scent I'd come to associate with bureaucracy and long battles. But today, I wasn't here to fight the county. I was here to arm myself. A receptionist with bright red glasses looked up as I approached. "Hi," I said, setting my binder on the counter. "I need to speak with someone about a possible jurisdiction dispute with a homeowners association." She let out the kind of sigh that suggested she heard that phrase more often than she wanted to. "Let me guess," she said, tapping her nails on the desk. "Maple Ridge Estates." I blinked. "How did you know?" She raised a knowing eyebrow. "Because they've been here 3 times this month. And every single time, it's some complaint about a property outside their boundary line. They like to Expand creatively. Creative was one word for it. Psychotic was another. She motioned toward the hallway. Go to room 204. That's zoning. I thanked her and walked down the corridor. On the way, I passed framed maps of the county from decades past. Old, sepia-toned, beautiful in a way old documents sometimes are. And every one of them showed the same border. Maple Ridge Estates ended miles before my parcel ever began. Room 204's door was open. A middle-aged man with graying hair and a half-empty coffee cup sat behind a mountain of paperwork. "Morning," he said without looking up. "If you're here about chickens, dogs, sheds, fences, or HOA bullying, take a number." I cracked a small smile and took a seat. HOA bullying, actually. He finally glanced up. Maple Ridge. Of course. He set his coffee down. You moving in or moving out? Just moved in. Lucky you, he muttered. Or unlucky, depending how you look at it. I opened my binder and slid the documents toward him. They are claiming my house is under their authority. I've already gotten violation notices for things they literally dragged into place themselves. He nodded slowly as he flipped through my evidence, pausing occasionally to make notes. Yep, this is textbook Holbrook. So Karen's reputation reached all the way into county offices. That honestly didn't surprise me. He pointed to the dotted line on the HOA map. This isn't even legal. HOAs can't redraw boundaries. Only the county can. She's claiming an aesthetic area of influence. He snorted. That's not a thing. I know. He shuffled the papers into a neat stack. Look, you are absolutely outside their jurisdiction. If they continue to harass you, they are risking a civil complaint. In fact, he typed something into his computer. There are already 3 past complaints about them overreaching, Dut. That was better than coffee. That was fuel. So what can I do? I asked. You got 2 options. He held up 2 fingers. 1, file a harassment complaint with us. We'll send a formal warning. Usually shuts them up for a few months. And the second, he leaned back and folded his arms. Or you can go nuclear. My interest peaked. Define nuclear. You file for a private property exemption clarification. That triggers a county inspector, a boundary audit, and a legal review of HOA enforcement practices. Maple Ridge already borderline hates us. That move will make them lose their minds. A slow smile spread across my face. Option 2. He chuckled as he handed me the paperwork. I thought so. By the time I left the county office, the sun was high and the heat clung to the air like a warning. But inside me, something new had ignited, resolve sharpened into a weapon. When I got home, however, everything changed. My mailbox was open. Papers scattered across the ground. A camera, yes, an actual security camera, was mounted on a pole facing my driveway. It wasn't mine. I stared at it, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Oh, she's bold now. I stormed to the camera pole, grabbed it with both hands, and ripped it straight out of the ground. The wires snapped with a crack. A car horn blared. I turned just in time to see Karen's SUV screech to a halt across the road. She jumped out, furious, more furious than I'd ever seen her. You destroyed HOA property, she shrieked. You put a surveillance camera on my land. I shot back. It was facing the road. It was on my soil. You're recording this, she screamed to her invisible audience. This man is unstable. I looked around. What audience? You filming for your fan club. She gasped like I had insulted the Queen. I have every right to monitor activity for the safety of our neighborhood. You have no right on my property. Everything you do impacts Maple Ridge. That sounds like a personal problem. She marched toward me, binder raised like a weapon. If you don't cooperate, I will make sure. She stopped mid-sentence. A sheriff's cruiser was pulling onto the road. Karen straightened immediately, smoothing her hair, adjusting her cardigan, plastering on a sweet smile. She transformed from rabid tyrant to gentle community angel like she'd rehearsed it. The deputy stepped out. Got a call about a disturbance. Karen rushed forward. Officer, Thank goodness. This man is destroying HOA property and threatening me. The deputy turned to me. So, I crossed my arms. Camera was trespassing. On my land. He glanced at the broken pole, then at Karen. Did you get permission to install this? Karen blinked rapidly. It was for community safety. That's not what I asked. I assumed. He held up a hand. Assuming someone's property is yours is not legal grounds. Her smile cracked. I handed the deputy my paperwork from the county office. I also filed for a boundary audit. This entire area is about to be reviewed. She has no authority over my property. Karen's face turned the color of spoiled yogurt. The deputy skimmed the first page, nodded, then addressed her again. I'm advising you to stay off his land. Any further trespassing could result in charges. Charges, she whispered, voice trembling with outrage. Yes, he said plainly. I thought steam might actually shoot from her ears. The deputy tipped his hat to me, returned to his car, and drove off. Karen stood frozen for 3 full seconds before she finally snapped. This isn't over, she seethed. You think you can just walk in here and break the harmony we built? You mean the dictatorship you built? Her eyes narrowed. You won't last here. I'll make sure of it. She stormed back to her SUV and peeled away, tires spitting gravel like furious punctuation marks. I watched her go, heart pounding, not from fear, but from certainty. She was losing control. And people like Karen, when cornered, don't back down. They explode. That afternoon, I installed my own cameras, legal ones. High-res, night vision, motion activated. If she planned to escalate, I'd have proof of every move she made. Right around sunset, while adjusting the angle on one camera, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. A shadow near my barn. I turned. The figure disappeared behind the building. Someone was here. Again. I walked slowly toward the barn, flashlight ready, pulse steady. The air felt charged, heavy with the threat of something unseen. Hey! I called. I know you're there. Silence. Cautiously, I rounded the corner. No one. Except a fresh set of footprints in the dirt. Leading away. Running. And on the barn wall, spray painted in red. Leave. I stood there, breathing deeply, staring at the dripping letters. This wasn't just HOA harassment anymore. Karen had help. All wise. She was stirring her community into a frenzy. Good. Because the more public her obsession became, the easier she'd be to destroy. This war had officially crossed the line. On the morning after the graffiti attack, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because of an alarm, but because a sudden sense of alertness snapped me upright. That sixth sense you get when something is wrong. Something off. I got dressed and headed outside, determined to survey the property before Karen or her henchmen had the chance to cause more trouble. But when I stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, I nearly dropped it. Someone had put stakes in the ground. Actual wooden stakes, painted white and spaced evenly along the border of my yard, forming a crooked, makeshift boundary line. And beside each stake, a small laminated sign read, Maple Ridge Estates, property of HOA. I stared in disbelief. Stakes. Signs. Overnight. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was delusion. I marched toward the nearest stake, ripped it out of the ground, and snapped it in half. The crack echoed like a gunshot in the quiet morning air. I moved down the line, breaking stake after stake, tossing the splintered pieces into a pile. For a moment, I wondered if she'd actually show her face again today. She did. Her SUV turned the corner so fast it fishtailed slightly, dust kicking up behind her. She slammed on the brakes and launched herself out of the car like a missile of outrage. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked. I lifted another stake and snapped it cleanly, cleaning garbage off my property. "That is not your property," she yelled, voice cracking. "We've redrawn the HOA boundary." I laughed so loudly a bird flew out of a nearby tree. "You can't redraw a boundary. You realize that, right? That's illegal. The county already told you." She stumped forward, folder under her arm. "I have board approval." You have 7 signatures from people who think the world begins and ends with your clipboard. I crossed my arms. The county inspector will be here any day now. When that happens, your fake lines won't save you. Her face twisted with panic, like she just realized her fantasy was slipping. You're ruining our community, she cried. We have worked so hard to maintain order, and you are destabilizing everything. Order. I pointed toward the vandalized barn. Spray painting threats? Stalking my house? Planting cameras? That's your definition of order. Her lips trembled, and for the first time, I saw something genuine flicker across her face. Fear. But fear of what? Losing control? Losing her pedestal? Or something else entirely? Before I could press her, she spun around, stumped back to her SUV, and peeled away. I watched her go, every cell in my body buzzing. Part of me wanted to confront her directly. Another part wanted to sit back and let her unravel on her own. But the largest part, the part that had endured enough, wanted justice. And justice was coming. By noon, the county inspector arrived. His name was Riley, mid-30s, calm, with a clipboard that looked like it had survived 2 hurricanes and a zoning war. He stepped out of his truck, surveyed the stakes, the signs, and the spray-painted threat on the barn, and sighed. Let me guess, he said. Maple Ridge. I nodded. He whistled. They are escalating. Last time they tried this with a homeowner, they claimed the fence was a visual hazard. That got thrown out in court. Good, I said, because they are not just harassing me, they are trespassing. He took pictures of everything. Me ripping up the stakes, the signs, the barn graffiti, the mailbox camera pole Karen had installed. Any idea who did this? He asked, pointing at the graffiti. Karen, I said, or one of her flying monkeys. He chuckled. Well, whoever it is, this is criminal mischief. He snapped another photo. Documented. As we walked the property line, he measured distances, double-checked coordinates, and compared them to the county's maps. This boundary hasn't moved since 1984, he said. The HOA's claim isn't just invalid, it's fabricated. Karen drew her own line. I said, that woman, he shook his head. She's made our life hell in the zoning office. Calls every week. Files complaints about dog colors. Yesterday she tried to claim someone's lawn chairs were an authorized permanent structure. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. And now she wants my land. Not going to happen, he said. When I file this report, the county will issue a cease and desist order. And what happens if she ignores it? I asked. He looked at me, dead serious. Then she gets fined, and Maple Ridge gets investigated. His voice lowered, and if they keep pushing, their HOA charter can be reviewed. In extreme cases, revoked. A spark of satisfaction lit in my chest. Good. Riley smirked. I get the feeling you're not going to let this go. No, I said. I'm not. Good, he replied. Bullies like that only win when people back down. We shook hands, and he headed back to his truck. But before he left, he paused. By the way, I keep your cameras rolling tonight. A chill crept down my spine. Why? Because whenever I show up, he said, Maple Ridge goes into meltdown mode. He wasn't wrong. That evening, I sat on my porch with a feed from my security cameras open on my phone. The air was cool. The sun slowed to set behind the trees, and despite the situation, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't afraid of Karen. I wasn't afraid of her board. And I definitely wasn't afraid of their empty threats. What I felt was fuel. Pure, clean adrenaline mixed with a quiet, unshakable resolve. But at 9:14 p.m., the calm shattered. The motion alert pinged. Someone was back. I opened the camera feed and saw 2 figures creeping along the side of my barn, heads down, flashlights off. One taller, one shorter, both wearing dark clothes. The taller one pointed toward the barn door. The shorter one nodded. They were breaking in. I didn't even think. I grabbed my flashlight, grabbed my phone, and headed out the back door. As I approached, staying low and quiet, I could hear them whispering. Just scratch the windows, make it look like vandalism. He'll have to call the HOA for security, then we can demand compliance. I stopped dead. They wanted me to rely on the HOA for protection. They wanted to create problems so they could swoop in as a solution. Unbelievable. I stepped forward, shining my flashlight directly at them. Hey! They both screamed, actual, high-pitched screams. One stumbled. The other tripped over a rake and face-planted into the date. I recognized the shorter figure first, Karen's husband. The taller one turned, and sure enough, it was a comb-over guy from the HOA board. Caught red-handed. What the hell are you two doing? I demanded. And no, you don't understand, the husband sputtered. We thought. You were trespassing, I snapped. Again. Comb-over man scrambled to his feet. This is part of Maple Ridge. No, I said coldly. It's not. They froze, breaths heavy, like animals trapped in headlights. Leave, I said. Now, before I call the sheriff. They exchanged panicked looks, then bolted into the night, practically tripping over each other on the way back to their car. As they sped away, I felt something icy settle in my chest. Karen wasn't just obsessed. She was dangerous, and now she was involving others in her madness. This wasn't just HOA harassment anymore. This was a cult, and I was done playing nice. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just defend myself. Tomorrow, I'd deliver the first real blow. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound outside had me jolting upright, listening for footsteps, for whispering, for another attempt to sabotage my property. But nothing happened. Not after Karen's husband and her comb-over crony sprinted away like teenagers caught egging a car. By sunrise, exhaustion threatened to drag me down, but my anger kept me awake. Not frantic anger. Focused anger. Weaponized anger. The kind of anger you can sharpen. I brewed coffee strong enough to resurrect the dead, then sat at my kitchen table reviewing the video footage from the night before. The recordings were crystal clear. 2 grown adults sneaking onto my property, whispering about staging damage, and running like frightened ferrets the moment I confronted them. It was perfect. Everything I needed. I downloaded the clips and created 3 separate files. 1 for the sheriff, 1 for the county inspector, and 1 for later. Then I drove straight to the sheriff's station. Sheriff Daniel was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, with a calm voice and the kind of patience only someone who had seen everything could possess. When he recognized me from the week before, he sighed. Maple Ridge again. I nodded. This time they broke into my barn. His hand paused halfway to his coffee. Tell me everything. I handed him my phone, playing the clips. His jaw tightened as he watched Karen's husband and the board members sneaking around like dollar store ninjas. When the video ended, he exhaled slowly. Unbelievable. Can you do something? I asked, because I'm not waiting for them to escalate again. Oh, I'll do something, he said, standing. Trespassing, attempted property damage. This isn't HOA business anymore. It's criminal. He printed out a report, took my statement, then headed toward the door. You available later today? Yes. Good, because I have a feeling I'll need you to confirm some things when I talk to them. When I got home, I found an envelope wedged under my door. A letter from the HOA. I already knew it was going to be ridiculous, but the contents surpassed even my expectations. Notice of termination of community privileges, the letter explained, incorrectly, that because of my hostile behavior, I would lose access to HOA amenities such as a community pool, the clubhouse, the newsletter, and the holiday parade. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. I didn't have access to those things to begin with. That's what not being in the HOA means. But the second page made my laughter stop. Failure to comply may result in community-wide action. Community-wide action. Threats. They were actually threatening collective retaliation. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a folder labeled evidence, full court. The pile in that folder was growing nicely. Around noon, a knock echoed through the house. I checked the camera feed. Sheriff Daniels. And behind him, Karen's husband. Comb over. 2 more board members. all standing in a neat little cluster on my driveway, looking like a dysfunctional choir group about to perform a hymn titled Thou Shalt Obey the HOA. I stepped outside. Karen wasn't wearing sunglasses this time. Her eyes were red, either from rage or lack of sleep. Maybe both. Daniels greeted me with a nod. Thanks for coming out. I'm here to discuss the trespassing incident. Karen immediately cut in. There was no trespassing. That barn is community property. It is not community property, I said. It's within visibility limits, she snapped. The sheriff held up a hand. Visibility limits don't make something yours. Karen's husband stepped forward. Sheriff, with all due respect, we were checking for fire hazards. It was a safety inspection. A safety inspection, Daniels repeated slowly. Yes. Karen said, seizing the lie. We have a right to ensure compliance for the safety of our residents. Daniels raised an eyebrow. Did you notify the homeowner? No, Karen said quickly, then caught herself. I mean, yes, that is, we notified the community. I stared. You sent a newsletter blasting me. You didn't say you were coming onto my land. It's implied, she snapped. Daniels turned to the group. Do any of you have documentation, authorization, anything showing you had legal cause to enter this property? Silence. Then Karen spoke, voice dripping with desperation. We are the HOA. We don't need permission. Oh, Karen, wrong answer. The sheriff pulled a folded document from his pocket. This is the county's confirmed boundary map. This property is not under your HOA. Any further trespassing will result in charges. Karen went pale. This is outrageous, she shrieked. We're just trying to protect our neighborhood. That doesn't give you the right to break the law, Daniels said. Her husband stepped forward. We can fix this quietly, Sheriff. No need for charges. We'll just stay on our side. Your side, Daniels repeated. This whole incident happened because you don't know where your side is. Comover sputtered. We were misinformed. Daniels gestured toward me. The homeowner has video proof that you weren't checking fire hazards. You were planning to sabotage his property. Karen's face twisted with fury, but underneath it, I saw something else. Panic. True, deep panic. The sheriff cleared his throat. I strongly suggest you all leave this property and refrain from further contact unless invited. Do I make myself clear? The board nodded. Karen didn't. She glared at me, an unblinking, venomous stare that could have melted steel. This isn't over, she whispered. I stepped closer, voice low. Actually, it's just beginning. The sheriff ushered them back to their vehicles. Karen was the last to leave, eyes still locked on me like she was memorizing my face for her private hit list. When they finally drove off, Daniels turned to me. They're on thin ice. If they step out of line again, they'll be dealing with more than a warning. Good, I said, because they're not done. I know, he said, so be ready. Turns out, I didn't have to wait long. That evening, every Maple Ridge resident received a mass email from Karen. Someone leaked it to me within minutes. The subject line, Community Emergency, Hostile Occupant on Border Property. She accused me of threatening residents, attacking HOA members, refusing to comply with community standards, endangering property values, creating a hostile environment. She ended it with, we must unite to protect our way of life. It was absurd. It was defamatory. It was exactly what I wanted, because now she'd made her war public, and publicly is the best way for tyrants to fall. I sat back, a slow, satisfied grin spreading across my face. Tomorrow, I'd expose her. Tomorrow, I'd drag the HOA into the light. Tomorrow, the real revenge would begin. Karen had pushed me far enough, far past enough. The email she sent, the one calling me a hostile occupant and rallying the neighborhood against me, was a final nail in her own coffin, and she hammered it in herself. That night, as the clock hit midnight, I sat at my desk compiling everything. Every video, every letter, every timestamp threat, every piece of proof of her harassment, abuse of authority, and criminal activity. I organized it all into a single master folder on my hard drive, then made 2 backup copies. One I uploaded to a secure cloud account. The other, a flash drive I would deliver in person in the morning. Revenge, I've learned, tastes best when served at exactly the right temperature. By sunrise, I had a plan so airtight that not even Karen's shrill screeching could punch a hole through it. At 8 a.m., I drove to the county office. The same place Karen had claimed would never help me. Funny thing about bullies, they only imagine they are powerful until someone shows up with receipts. The county clerk, a quiet woman with glasses and a cardigan decorated with little embroidered cats, typed my name into the system, her eyebrows raised. "Oh, you, the Maple Ridge case." I blinked. "You've heard." She sighed. "Half the office has. Karen's been trying to get your property annexed into the HOA for months." "Annexed?" I repeated. She tried to redraw land boundaries. She submitted 3 different amendments, all rejected for being illegal. This woman said it so casually, as if Karen's insanity was just an item on a checklist. I handed her the flash drive. "These are the videos showing her board members trespassing on my land. And here," I slid a printed packet across the desk, "are copies of her threatening letters and the email she sent to the neighborhood last night." The clerk nodded, eyes sharp. "We'll forward all of this to the county attorney. You might want to stay available today. I suspect this will escalate quickly." Good. I wanted it to. By noon, the blowback began. A Maple Ridge homeowner, someone I'd never even met, sent me a message on Facebook. "Thank you for exposing her. You're not the only one she's been tormenting." Then another message came, and another, and another. Within an hour, I had nearly 50 messages from residents. People she fined unfairly, people she bullied, people she embarrassed publicly, people she screamed at in meetings, people she threatened over lawns, decorations, garden beds, Christmas lights, and even what shade of beige they painted their doors. Karen had spent years harvesting enemies. I had just handed them a reason to unite. And no, they did. At 3 p.m., the sheriff called me. "We're heading to the HOA office," he said. "We might need you there." On my way. As I drove down the familiar, manicured streets of Maple Ridge, I noticed something astonishing. People outside, gathered in groups, talking, pointing, holding printed copies of something. The email, the videos, the letters. Word had spread. When I pulled up to the HOA clubhouse, the scene was more than I expected. A crowd of at least 60 residents stood outside the building, shouting. Some held signs like they'd been waiting their entire lives to do it. "Stop the abuse. HOA is not a dictatorship. Fire Karen. Enough is enough." Then I saw Karen, standing on the front steps, shrieking at the top of her lungs. "This is a smear campaign. This is treason. You're all sheep." Sheriff Daniels walked calmly up to her. "We need to speak with you." "I will not be silenced," she screamed. "This community obeys me. I am the HOA. "Oh, Karen," not a good thing to say. Especially not when 3 county officers were standing right behind you. One of them, an investigator in a navy blue blazer, stepped forward. Karen Whitfield. She spun toward him. "What now?" "You are under investigation for the following allegations: harassment, misuse of HOA funds, unauthorized attempt to alter county property lines, and criminal trespassing." Karen's face twisted into something almost inhuman. "Lies! All lies." Another officer presented a clipboard. "We have signed resident statements. A lot of them. And we have video evidence," Daniels added. "Quite a bit." Karen's eyes locked on me. "You," she hissed, voice cracking. "You did this. You're destroying everything." I stepped forward, calm, controlled, cold. "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "You did. All I did was stop you." The crowd erupted in cheers. Karen stared at them, betrayed, furious, shaking with rage. Then she did something nobody expected. She lunged at me. The sheriff caught her mid-swing. Her shoe flew off. Her hair came partially undone. She shrieked like a feral goose. Residents gasped. Phones were recording from every angle. Daniels restrained her as she continued thrashing. That's enough. He ruined MY community, she howled. No, Daniels said firmly. You ruined it yourself. The officers escorted her, still screaming, into the back of a police vehicle. Karen Whitfield, self-proclaimed queen of Maple Ridge, was driven away as 60 residents cheered her downfall. The HOA board collapsed within a week. Karen's husband resigned. The comb-over guy disappeared, resigned too. The remaining board members called an emergency election. Not a single resident nominated Karen. Nobody even joked about it. The new board sent me a letter, a very apologetic one. They explained that Maple Ridge would undergo audits, reforms, and new transparency policies. They invited me to a community barbecue as a gesture of goodwill. I politely declined. My revenge was complete. I didn't need a hot dog to celebrate it. But that wasn't the end of Karen. A month later, her trial began. Trespassing? Proven. Harassment? Proven. Misuse of funds? Proven. Apparently she'd been funneling HOA money into a beautification project consisting entirely of new decor for her own home. When the verdict was read, I heard it from a resident who messaged me excitedly. Karen is banned from serving on any HOA board for life. A fitting punishment for someone who thought she was a law. As for me, I finally got the peace I've been fighting for. My home is quiet. My land is safe. My bond stands exactly where it always stood. And every night, I look outside and appreciate the silence, the real silence, knowing it was earned. I didn't want a war. But when Karen brought one to my doorstep, I ended it. And sometimes ending the reign of a tyrant is the sweetest revenge of all.